Welcome. We bid you welcome, John Clauser, Johnny Metal, the Metal Dad, coming to you from my music corner of the world, and my fellow cohort in the Royal Scam here, John the Music Nut. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, I got a case of dynamite and I can hold out here all night, brother. How about you?
Oh, I love it. Be born again, my friend. Won't you sign in, stranger?
That's
Love it,
right.
love it, love it. After a 25-week run of talking about Judas Priest, we are switching gears a little bit. And we're going to do what I'm trying to think of a name for this. We're probably just going to call this an album spotlight because this album that we're going to talk about today has deep roots with both of us. And we're going to talk today about the fifth studio album here by Steely Dan, The Royal Scam. Look at that absolutely beautiful cover.
What
What
would
is
you call it beautiful? It's quite interesting. A
um
man sleeping above, I'm sorry, a man sleeping below dragons.
buildings turning into monsters?
There
Yes.
you go.
How is it that I think Fagan and Becker put it? Let's see. Staring at the most hideous album cover of the 70s, bar none, excepting perhaps Can't Buy a Thrill. So
Yeah.
yeah, go figure that out. But anyway, so this one released May 31st, 1976, recorded between November 1975 and March of 1976, recorded in ABC Studios in Los Angeles, A&R at New York City, 41 minutes and 12 seconds. Producer Gary Katz, who was doing a lot of, I believe, was doing a lot of Steely Dan's material at the time.
Yes.
Let's see, what do we got here? Um, let's see. Got to get to my sheets with the weekly charts here. So down in Peter Kerr and Bicycle Legs' neck of the woods, down in Australia, this got up to number 30 on the Kent Music Report. On the Dutch album charts, top 100, it got to number 14. Down in Steve Deluxe's neck of the woods, this one hit number 3 on the RMNZ uh, uh, charts. UK albums, this went to number 11 and it's topped at number 15 on the US Billboard 200. It would go platinum. It has 3 singles. Um, Kid Charlemagne, the lead off track, would spend 3 weeks on the top 100 Billboard, only good at getting up to number 82. The Fez did a little bit better. The album side A closer got to number 59. Haitian Divorce did really well on the UK singles charts, peaking at number 17. This album is got a whole host of wonderful studio musicians. That's what Steely Dan was. They weren't necessarily a band like say Judas Priest would be.
They
They
were
were
early.
early on, yes,
They
but
were
then
early.
early on, but they would be this would be like all kinds of different people. So you have of course Donald Fagen doing keyboards and lead and background vocals. Walter Becker on guitar and bass guitar. They were the main two songwriters. Keyboards, you got Paul Griffin, who has a co-write on the Fez. Don Grolnick on guitar. You got 4 big hitters here. Larry Carlton, well known in the jazz field, studio musician par excellence. Denny Diaz, Dean Parks, Elliot Randall, somebody I would come to know a lot through guitar magazines. Chuck Rainey also playing bass. Rick Murata would play on a couple tracks, but the most of this album is handled by a fella named Bernard Purdy. Great drumming on his part. Gary Coleman, no, not that Gary Coleman on percussion. Victor Feldman percussion keyboards. Chuck Finley trumpet. Bob Finley trumpet. Dick Slide Hyde on trombone, good name for a trombone player. Jim Horn on saxophone, Johnson saxophone, John Clemmer saxophone, on backing vocals, Vanetta Fields, Clyde King, Shirley Matthews, Michael McDonald, Gary Sherman, and a fellow that would go on eventually to join a band who is referenced on this album, Timothy B. Schmidt. I'm going to let John take this from here, but we are going to have a lot to talk about with this gem of an album. We're not going to talk much about this cover, I don't think, but there's 9 songs in here that I think we are going to have an absolute blast talking about. So, John, let's do this before we do that. Before we get into the songs, your introduction to Steely Dan.
I heard Steely Dan a lot when I was growing up. And as time went on album oriented rock got more and more popular in the 1980s, I heard more and more Steely Dan. Not just the singles, I heard the singles in the 70s when I was a child. In the 80s, I started hearing the deep cuts to the point where my senior year in high school, I picked this up, Steely Dan's Greatest Hits, on cassette. And by this point, I was already buying CDs, but I bought the cassette because I just wanted a little taste. And then if I wanted to build, I'd buy CDs later. I'll get into that as we go along. But I bought this and then I wanted more and more, but I didn't buy any CDs until 1994, which was right after. Oh, I'm sorry. This came out in late 1993. This is Citizen Steely Dan. This has all 7 of their studio albums at that time. During this time, they weren't making new music. They were finally going out and playing as a live unit again. And they weren't touring for the majority of their career in the 70s. They didn't tour. They stopped touring after the Pretzel Logic album. But this has the first 7 albums, and it has a few other songs on here. Like it has a live version of Bozvatva. We have the single for Here at the Western World. We have a different version of Everyone's Gone to the Movies. And there's one other track here it's the demo track of Everyone's Gone to the Movies. There's one other track here that's a different one, but everything else is just the standard 7 albums on 4 CDs. So this is when I really was getting big into them. And then the next year, they came out with a Live in America, which was for the tour they were doing 93 and 94. And there's another interesting album cover with the mummy holding carrying the damsel in distress. So yeah, you gotta love their album covers. But as time went on, I had more and more appreciation for them. I did see them live, but I didn't see them until 2016. We'll get a little more into that later. But as time went on, this was a band I just kept going back to over and over again. And this album that we're going to talk about is my favorite album by Steely Dan. So, Kid Charlemagne is the opening track. The rhythm's carried by electric piano, perhaps a clavinet that's carrying this rhythm. There's a sick groove on here. There's a lot of sick grooves on this album. One thing about this album, number 1, it's their most guitar-based album. Number 2, probably their most funk-based album. Now, I'm not saying there's a lot of both, but there's more of both than the other albums. Another thing about this album, it doesn't have the lights out hit singles, but everything done is done very well. Tons of craftsmanship, very classy. Excuse me. Kid Charlemagne opens the track up. The rhythm, as I said, is carried by the electric piano. It's a story about Owsley Stanley, who Rolling Stone dubbed the King of Acid. He was best known for supplying drugs for bands like the Grateful Dead and a lot of the other bands that came out of that Haight-Ashbury section of San Francisco, I believe, back in the 60s. So the song's about him. And the thing about this song with the guitars, Larry Carlton's playing the solo on here, but his guitar slowly comes in by the second chorus, and then he gives you this excellent solo on here. And then the outro is the guitar work on that is magnificent.
Mm.
And you could sing these lines, but the great call and response between Donald and the backup singers on here, nice harmony. It's a memorable track. I think it should have did a little more than it did, but it has endured very well as one of their great, great songs in there, amongst a ton of songs in their canon. The Caves of Altamira. That's is a coming of age story, which is predominantly it's carried by Donald Fagen's vocal line, with the keyboards adding flashes of color, particularly the not the electric piano so much, but there's keyboards pointing in these little parts that are very memorable. You got a great chorus on here. The horn lines are excellent on here. The horn lines you can sing, especially at the end of the song. The solo on here from John Clemmer on sax is wonderful. Excellent track. Don't Take Me Alive. One of my favorite songs from 1977. If you want to know more about that, please check out our show on Grant's Rock Warehouse, where we talk about our favorite 10 songs from 1977. To me, this should have been the single on the album because this is the song that's really endured the most. This is the song you hear the most on AOR radio. It wasn't a single, it should have been, because this is a song where it's so infectious and catchy. People who are not really music nerds like us, you can hear them singing this song because it's got a fantastic chorus. Very easy to sing. Larry's guitar work on here, again, that beginning, that feedback part, and then the end with that really sparse, classy lines at the end.
Hmm.
Perfect way to begin and end a song. But what goes on in the middle is infectious, and it's a strong track, memorable track. Should have been a single, but it wasn't. My favorites, well, it's one of my favorite 10 songs from 77, so it's my favorite song on the album, amidst several. Sign Stranger, one of two songs on this album that has a bridge, a vocal bridge. Sign Stranger is carried by its piano line, and the other instruments are coming in and out and they're working around that piano line. The chorus is really short. The most memorable part is what Bernard Purdy's doing on the drums in there, those quick fills. The piano here carries the song. The verse, I'm sorry, the bridge is very good, and the piano solos on here are very well done. The end part of the song, with the horn playing that na 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 na, and then the guitar coming in doing a call and response thing, is wonderful.
Mm.
This is one of three songs that was on Alive in America.
Okay.
Three songs from Royal Scammer on this album: Kid Charlemagne, Sign Stranger, and another track I'll talk about very soon. The Fez is the next song that was a single, as John alluded to. Protect Yourself, safe sex song. Paul Griffin has a co-write on this because what happened was he took that melody that Donald Fagen brought in and he made it better. So they gave him a co-write on this track. But here you got the call and response between the horns and the guitars. Walter Becker's guitar lines on here are superb. Excellent song. It was a single. Maybe I don't know if it would have been a hit single based on its theme, but it's a really cool tune. But it's a great song.
Oh yeah.
Green Earrings is the I'm sorry,
Oh yeah. Oh no, no, I just said oh yeah.
and the hook here on the Fez is that it's that keyboard line there. It's like the keyboard line is the hook, but it's not part of the main theme. But it's a cool tune. Green Earrings is as hard funk as they would get. I'm not saying that this is Mandrill or the Meters or James Brown, but they had this funk part to them that was an integral part of their sound, but they never go full blown funk because they had other things going on. The funk lines, bass lines in this are magnificent. And on the live album, the horns play those funk lines. The guitar lines in here, superb, fantastic chorus. Elliot Randall has a great guitar solo in this song. Denny Dias was an original member of Steely Dan, but then did work with them through the Gaucho album as a session musician. He has a great guitar solo on the musical Bridge. Very cool tune. Haitian Divorce. This has more of a reggae feel to it. This was a big hit in the UK, as John alluded to. This is a really cool bridge in it. The Talkbox guitar is in here in 76. Talkbox you heard a lot because of Peter Frampton's Frampton Comes Alive. The Talkbox guitar is a big part of this song, played by Dean Parks. Cool chorus. The bridge works spectacularly on this track. And that's also on this Greatest Hits cassette that I had out earlier. Everything You Did. Turn Up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening. This is a song about cheating. Very cynical lyric. Very cynical. Simplest song musically on here, but it works in the scope of the album because not a lot of this album is about positive things. There's a lot of seedy topics being discussed here. This is a cool tune. It is my least favorite song on the album, but it's still really cool.
Mm-hmm.
The last song is The Royal Scam. And I think this is what the title song. This is wonderful because what you have in here is this solemn, slow track based on a piano line and Donald's lyric. You don't have the killer solo, but it's a great exhibit of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. Let me explain that. What is brought in here is a little solo that's every time it's short, but what they play is based on the mood of the song. This is a wonderful epic. The chorus is very short. See the glory of the royal scam. And the harmony on there from the backing vocals is wonderful. It worked, but that's how this song is. It's just a build with, and it stays in that same vein. When you think it's gonna go to a different place in the solo, it stops, and then it stops very abruptly before it kicks back into that main theme. It's a memorable track. The lyric is very memorable too, even though it's telling this long story. But whatever is brought in here, whether it's the guitar line, the horn line, the piano line, it's all based on that theme. Immaculately created here.
Yeah.
So, All Music gave this a 3.5 out of 5. I respectfully disagree. 10
Oh,
out of
yeah.
10. Easy.
Easily.
Easy. Their fourth of 5 albums in a row, I would give a 10. And my favorite. And all of those albums are all different in scope.
Uh-huh.
If we were to do a review about Asia, the next album, which was a huge hit, the review would be totally different because
Uh-huh.
what they did on those songs was closer to jazz, and the themes were more spread out. There was a little more soloing on this. Here, most of the songs are tighter outside the title track. Yeah. 10. And I think the reason it's not spoken as highly as some of the other albums before that or after is it just didn't have that knockout hit single because nearly all of them had a all of them except I believe Countdown to Ecstasy had a top 40 hit and this album in the States. So there you go. 10 out of 10 for me.
Wow. Well, you know, for me, I was introduced to this as a young child, uh, around the same time that I'm getting into Kiss. This is we're talking like mid '70s here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting into Kiss. I'm introduced to the first Boston album. I think by this point, I'm sure I'm hearing Frampton Comes Alive. Um, there was this other little band from one of those Midwestern states called Kansas that I think I was getting exposed a little bit to. Uh, Foghat, Status Quo, depending on how you prefer to say it. Alex Harvey. Having a brother and sister who were 15 and 18 years older than, or 13 and 15 years older than me, gave me a wide variety of music to be introduced to. And then this thing comes along. Again, I was trying to get some information out of my brother and sister. Neither of them could really tell me anything. They must have heard stuff on the radio and say, "Hey, that sounds like a really good that sounds really good." I guess they didn't really pay much attention to the album cover. But anyway, so I can remember in the first house that we lived in as a child, I can remember listening to this album on my brother's stereo. And for some reason, like my sister had a stationary bike, and I would climb up on the stationary bike and sit on it like a drummer. And I can remember actually playing like air drums to like Green Earrings. I don't know why Green Earrings is the one that sticks in my mind, but I just remember that. So I have I have a long, long history with this album. And this has been ingrained into my DNA so deeply, to a point where this is probably in my top 10 to top 15 albums of all time. So that's just how deep this thing goes with me. So, um, yeah, I mean, Kid Charlemagne kicks off, you get that clavinet sound or whatever the keyboard sound is. You get told this story loosely based on, like you said, Owsley Starkey, wait a minute,
Stanley.
Stanley. Thank you. Can't read
Yes.
my own writing. Anyway, yeah, and just all the lyrical. I mean, this is not a happy song about drugs. I mean, this is just like almost like a time piece of like a cultural moment caught in time is really what this song is about, because you're hearing what that the drug scene in San Francisco had to have been like in the late 60s and the early 70s. You know, basically talking about this ambition, the rise and fall, and then the whole disillusionment with life or with drugs or whatever it was. But then of course what stands out, what always has stood out to me in this song was that Larry Carlton guitar solo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness gracious. What a beautiful solo that just is so lyrical and just so moving. You feel every note of of the solo, and that's with Larry Carlton's playing, period. And so, you get that nice, almost like sense of relief when you get that bend with the Eddie Van Halen tap to end the solo. And then you go back into that last verse. Just a great song, great background vocals. I mean, gosh, that get it on, Kid Charlemagne. Great, great lyrical, just great harmonies. Beautiful, beautiful song. Goes in the caves of Altamira where you get those low horn sounds, that really deep low horn vibe that goes on. It just that's what carried to me. That's really what always carried this song. Again, I think let's go back to when we were kids. How many times did we want to go out and maybe where we lived, if you had the capability of it, to maybe build your own little fort, of sorts, and you create your own, or maybe you just do this in your bedroom where you're just creating this this imaginary world. Well, that's what the Caves of Altamira is here. It's like you say, that loss of innocence of, the busy world is not for me, so I went and found my own. And it just, all these beautiful lines. I mean, okay, maybe not beautiful is maybe not a great word for it, but it is a very, it is almost a bleak kind of a look, but in a way, it is kind of beautiful because he's painting this beautiful world that he sees. And as with this, with the idea of going into those caves of Altamira in Spain, where they have these, you know they before the call, when they wrote it on the wall, or before the fall, when they wrote it on the wall, when there wasn't even any Hollywood, that line. I mean, it goes, that's how far back this goes. Great, great stuff. I mean, of course, you get the beautiful solo by John Clammer on tenor sax. Just a great track. Um, Don't Take Me Alive. Again, here comes Larry Carlton right back at you. Um, Here again, another kind of a bleak kind of song, because here you got this guy on the run, and he hears the angry mobs. He hears the police, but you ain't gonna take him alive. He's gonna fight. He's gonna fight for what it's worth. Again, gosh, so much beautiful lyrical notes here by Larry Carlton, and Donald Fagen's delivery. You feel that emotion of the protagonist here in this song. Um, just a classic, absolute classic of the album. Sign Stranger. Um, Paul Griffin's piano here. Oh gosh. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, can you imagine going into like a jazz club and hearing this kind of jazzy, almost like a ragtime like playing here? That, and then you have Elliot Randall's kind of, guitar kind of weaving in and out. Here again, you get this otherworldly sci-fi like feel of, almost like, I don't know. I almost want to call it like Gangster's Paradise, because this is where all the bad guys go to get their names kind of almost like wiped clean. Pepe has a scar from ear to ear, but he'll wipe your mug shots clean. Here
Mm-hmm.
again, this is a chance for people to have almost like a new take on life kind of thing, with no policeman one and nothing like that. But Signing Stranger, well, that's how you're starting off life again. Um, Again, cool song. You get that, a lot of that kind of reggae kind of playing by Elliot Randall in the background, but it's
Mm-hmm.
that piano. It's that jazzy ragtime piano that just beautiful. Like you said, with the Fez, the album closer with Paul Griffin,
Side.
uh, co-write, but yeah, the side A closer for on this. Probably the brightest sounding song on the entire album when you stop to think about it.
I agree with that.
From a musical perspective, this is probably the brightest sounding of, with that lyrical, do 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 do, do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but again, the repetitiveness of the lyric, and you ain't gonna do it without the Fez on and all these other things. And I'm like, what in the world? Yeah, as a kid, I'm thinking, what in the world is the Fez? I think I would learn about a fez, because of, like, the Shriners, that's what they wore on their heads.
Me too.
Right.
That's how I learned about them.
So, so I was like,
Pennsylvania.
go figure. I didn't never would have thought of it being a safe sex song, but hey, go figure. I would never have thought of Donald Fagen and Walter Becker doing something like that. But anyway, it's a catchy song. It has, there's you feel, and you remember all those hooks. So it's just a very pleasant song. Flip that side over, you get that funky jazzy rock of Green Earrings. Again, this dark side of like attraction kind of a thing, but again, you get Denny Diaz's bridge work on the guitar. Then that outro with Elliot Randall just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
that crazy sound that he does at the end of that. But again, you get Bernard Purdy, and he's just like, man, he's banging away back there.
Mm-hmm.
Great track. Probably that's probably why I like playing air drums on it on my sister's stationary bike. But anyway, um, Haitian Divorce, very reggae influenced here. With that, as I read the Dean Parks talk box on a modified talk box by Walter Becker, so I'm not exactly sure
Yes.
what he did to modify it. But anyway, who knew that going to Haiti to get a divorce was such a big thing in the 70s? I didn't know that. But anyway, apparently that was a big thing back in the day. Who knew? Tells a very gripping story. Again, not a very happy story here, but it's still a gripping story that you're hearing in this. But you do get that kind of that more that reggae feel, which I'm not a big reggae guy, but this song I love it because there's just there's so many other elements that gets into it that I just makes it very attractive to me. So I dug the song. Everything you did, yeah, I can't put it any differently. Jealousy, betrayal, obsession, the Eagles. Hey, what more could you want, right?
Mhm.
Um, again, let's see, Larry Carlton here again on guitar. One of the other songs that features, of course, Rick Marotta on drums. That and Don't Take Me Alive are the only two that he plays drums on. Everything else here is the Bernard Purdy Show, which is exemplified deeply on the Royal Scam. When you get those nice little keyboard and then that little those are the key of the percussion, and then they start in with the drums, and then here comes Larry Carlton with this simple little that snarling little that gripped me. That gripped me as a kid, and it still grips me today. I still love that line. Here again, this tells I couldn't help but think of a Barney Miller show. All right, this you'll like this reference. So I don't know if you were ever a Barney Miller fan.
I became more of a Barney Miller fan as I got older, but my father had it on all the time in the 70s and early 80s.
Love the show. I actually own the first season on DVD.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, great show. We've watched it on TV enough, but there's I think it was in the I think it was in the first season. There was or maybe it was the second season. It was the first season probably, but there was an episode called Graft. Okay, and you had Kelly, who he's been promoted up to internal affairs. Nobody likes Kelly. Everybody hates Kelly. Well, Kelly just seemed to have it out for everybody. So, Kelly's gone. And then they're thinking, okay, well, Armin Gual is like, well, I think he's coming after me. And they all look at him and say, well, what do you think that for? Well, I got this cousin who lives down in this basement in this building, and he goes on and on. And he came up from Argentina, and he goes on and then Barney's like, well, why doesn't he just become a citizen? Well, he doesn't think it's worth it. And I'm thinking when they wander in from the city of St. John without a dime, and then you just go through these seedy lyrics of all these things that they're getting themselves into, and you're thinking, I wonder if they're just there to make the best out of the American dream, but maybe not go through all the ins and outs of becoming an actual citizen or something like that. But oh, it's the story just weaves in and out so much. The music is you feel it. You feel the horns come in. You feel the keyboards. You feel the guitar. You feel everything. You feel the background vocals. Everything is such a great song. You have this. You feel the fade out as it fades out and then ends the album. You how is it when you get to an end of an album and you're so anxious you want to flip that baby right back over and start listening to it all over again? Well, that's this album. There's a good reason why this is in my top 10 top 15 albums of all time. I there's what more can I really say about it that hasn't been said, that maybe hasn't been said enough. But one thing I want to touch on because we both saw them in 2016, my tour shirt from it. But now one thing that I want to talk about is the beauty of Bernard Purdie. Okay. When you listen to the Royal Scam, I'll probably say that's probably my favorite song on the album. I probably love that over all of them. I can't even I couldn't even rank these songs on this album. It's that it would be that difficult. I think I'm probably like you though. Maybe everything you did might be at my bottom, but boy, it's like I said with the Judas Priest ranking, millimeters.
Yeah. Like if you were to rank the songs like 1 to 10, my least favorite is Everything You Did, and I give it a 9.
Oh,
You know?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. But let's look at the Royal Scam, for example. Now, it's not a song when they would go play live again, not exactly a song they play a lot live.
Right.
Okay. Now, I checked out a couple live versions of this album, and I decided to call up our good friend, the professor, Peter Jones, on this.
Okay.
And I said, Peter, I don't know if you're a big fan of the Royal Scam or a big fan of Steely Dan in general. But if you happen to, can you listen to this live version of the Royal Scam? And I kind of would like to hear what your thinking is on this. Now, Bernard Purdie is not playing on these live versions. Peter did tell me his name, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Is it Keith Carlock? Because
Maybe that's it.
Keith Carlock played the shows that we saw in 2016.
Okay, that's
Magnificent
maybe
drummer.
yes. I agree with this. But on the Royal Scam, he's playing it straight as opposed to what you hear on the record. Has a lot of the space throughout most of the song, and so during these live versions, you're hearing this straight beat going on in the background throughout the parts that should be more pulled back. And I just thought that doesn't sound right. That sounds weird to me. Everything else about the song sounded okay, but that just sounded weird. So I'm like, why didn't they want to play it that way? I don't know. Again, not a song that they played a lot live. Probably when they would do like, I know at the Beacon Theater, they would do like, they had a special run where they were playing like each album in its entirety,
Correct. Yes.
which I can only imagine what those shows had to have been like. But um, but yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or other songs, comparatively speaking.
Well, I mean, I pretty much said my piece here. What I should have mentioned was the song Royal Scam, the first lyric and the last lyric are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they wandered in from the city of St. John without a dime. At the end, and they just do the chorus three times, that short chorus, and that was
Mm-hmm.
it. But the main theme begins and ends the same way. So yeah, this is pretty much it's pretty much how I feel about the album. Is sometime one thing about an excellent musician is when less is more.
Yeah.
And if you listen to this album, you'll hear some ghost notes on the bass. You'll hear certain parts where they're not playing it completely straight on the drums. That's what a master musician does. That's what a session musician does
Mm-hmm.
because they've played on so many different albums and recordings that they're given the sheet music and they come up with their interpretation of it, and it comes from the experience that they've gained throughout the years as a working musician in the studio. But yes, what is great about Steely Dan's catalog, I think, is they knew when to hold back. They didn't make the traditional song. It's not just based on riffs and then the loud chorus or anything like that. They were craftsmen.
Mm.
That's why excuse me, they became a studio band because, and what happened was one by one, everyone who was on those early albums left. And then it was just Becker, Becker and Fagan. But that's how much they valued their craft. And they could have went out and toured, but they didn't do it. It was all about the albums, the music. And over time, that music has aged so well. All of these albums, even there's albums you may not like as much, but there's so much to love on those albums. There's so much going on. They knew when to use subtlety and they knew when to pick up the pace and when to take it down.
Yeah.
I think that's what master writers and musicians do. And there's one of many albums, but like you can look at the whole catalog, and that's what Steely Dan did.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that I went, I've been talking so much about Bernard Purdie, and Bernard Purdie. One thing my brother mentioned to me was how he played with a local guy that you've heard of named Craig Thatcher.
Yes.
And he'd see he'd see Craig play at like Music Fest there in Bethlehem and other places, and
Mm-hmm.
Bernard would be drumming with him, and until he had no idea at the time, wow, this he's been on so much good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just but that's just how these studio musicians, some of them were. I mean, a lot of these guys never, maybe other than Michael McDonald or Timothy B. Schmidt or Larry Carlton, most of these guys never really went on to be in maybe a top tier band. They usually stayed more in the studio, like Elliot Randall or maybe a Denny Diaz or Dean Parks. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, early on, Jeff Baxter,
Well, Jeff Baxter,
and then
yeah,
he later was in the Doobie Brothers,
he was in the Doobie Brothers, and
and he's done a lot of solo albums too, and he's still out touring.
oh yeah, yes. I wonder if he's still sitting down though.
I'm going to say yes,
Wasn't
but I don't
wasn't
know for
wasn't that
sure.
his whole thing? He always sat down. He never stood throughout the performance.
I believe he still is. And we were talking, and you were mentioning Bernard Purdy, and we said this off air before we started. Bernard Purdy still plays out.
Oh yeah,
He still plays at the Falcon in Marlboro, New York, which is about 2 hours north of me.
yeah,
One day, hopefully, I get to see him while he's still out there.
yeah. That would be pretty cool to see. That would be pretty cool to see. But
And if you ever heard of Purdy Shuffle, which I'm
mhm,
sure a lot of you know what that is, that was him. That was the shuffle, drum shuffle that he did that a lot of bands picked up on.
mhm,
Most notably, in the song, he had the Picaro Shuffle, which was in on Rosanna, but
mhm.
that was based off of what Bernard Party did.
Yeah,
Bernard Purdy did
yeah,
with his use of triplets.
yeah, yeah. Just so yeah, my hats off to all the players on this thing. Because you could definitely tell that they just wanted to surround themselves with some of the best players on the planet, and they certainly found some great ones. Um, Now, you and I talked about where we saw them in 2016.
Yes.
Um, I actually have the set list of when I saw them pulled up here. So, and I don't know if how much you remember of the set, but I'm just gonna go through the set here. So they start off with a Donald Byrd and Booker Little cover called November Afternoon. It's basically just the backing band playing.
Okay.
They
Same with
go
us.
in, they go into Black Cow, followed by Asia, followed by Hey 19, followed by, and this is now they do go back a little bit, Black Friday. They go back to Asia with the Deacon Blues, which in Alabama, you gotta do Deacon Blues if you're in Alabama. It may not be the most, might not be exactly the most nicest way to compliment Alabama, but hey, roll tide, right? And then the only song they would perform from the Royal Scam on this show was Kid Charlemagne. Now, the guitar player that they had with him, great player. I don't know his name. I can't remember his name, but He was a great player. But come on, dude. At least capture some of the most iconic parts of Larry's solo, which
Okay.
he did not. He's just like doing his own thing, and he's like completely. There's like there's just some guitar solos that are just like so much a part of the song, and when you're just not even trying to emulate the solo, even down to that. I mean, come on, that's a to me that was an integral part of the song. Maybe it's just maybe I'm just a little goofy. That's
I recall that. I recall that as well when I saw
yeah,
them in Port Chester, New York at the Capitol Theater.
yeah. Going back a little bit to Showbiz Kids. After that, uh, and then the female background singers take over and they do dirty work, which is they did a fine version of that. I always liked, dirty work to me was always one of those songs that it just it never seemed to be like a real Steely Dan song to me. Like it could have been almost anybody really. Lyrically, yes, I don't, but I don't. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
I feel similar.
Okay.
I think Can't Buy a Thrill is a very good album, but to me, Steely Dan that we know and love was Countdown to Ecstasy.
Hmm.
They sound a little more Three Dog Night on that first album. And I know people think, oh, but that one was the one with the big hits. That had Do It Again. That
Yeah.
had Real Into the Years. That had Dirty Work, which was really popular. And yes, they're all great tracks.
Yeah.
That album, I mean, I would give it like a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
But to me, it's not, they didn't really find their vision.
Hmm.
It's more of a collection of songs than it is a piece. These albums, to me, when I listen to songs off of this, I don't know if they'd work on Pretzel Logic because all of their albums are different theme wise,
Yeah.
musically. There's more jamming on Countdown.
Hmm.
Pretzel Logic, all the songs are quick. Some of them not even 2 minutes.
Right.
This album, it's darker.
Yes. Very.
It has more of a dark theme. Most of the songs are, except for the title track, they're about 4 minutes or so. Asia, they're using sense of space a lot, but they're focusing on hooks more.
Hmm.
So Gaucho, they went dark, and Katie Line has its own similar different sound to it as well.
Hmm.
Gaucho, Gaucho, I think they worked a little too hard because they were perfectionists, and sometimes you can do too much of that.
Over
They didn't
perfect.
find that sweet spot as much on those previous albums,
Right.
but it's still a great
Oh, it's
record.
still a great record. Yeah.
That's how I feel. But getting back to Can't Buy a Thrill, it's probably it's one of the two I go back to the least because the other songs are really good, but I don't think they found their vision until Countdown to Ecstasy.
Right.
As much as I like, and Dirty Work is a great song,
Yeah.
and Do It Again is a great song, but
Love
to
Do It
me,
Again.
yeah, Do It Again is wonderful. And they already had their hooks. They already had great hooks at that point. But it doesn't feel as Steely Dan to me as what we're, even Everything Must Go, which was their last studio album, that still feels Steely Dan to me.
Hmm.
Can't Buy a Thrill is just a strong album, doesn't that maybe doesn't fully have its identity,
Yeah.
and it's kind of hard to explain. It's hard to say that about a band you love. We're more critical of the bands we love. I think when we're music geeks like we are, and I'll call myself a geek, that's fine. I don't look at that as a negative thing.
Mm-mm.
Um, I think we were a little more critical of the bands and the music that we love,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel quite. Can't Buy a Thrill, not quite as Steely. I know it's a long answer to a short question, but
No, no, no,
there
no,
you
it's
go.
good.
Yeah,
So I think in this section now, after Dirty Work, some cities I think got Godwhacker and some got Time Out of Mind. I think we got Time Out of Mind instead of Godwhacker because I
we
guess
got Godwhacker. I remember that clearly.
I almost want to say we did too, but I'm just going by what Setlist says because my memory is a little foggy. But my thinking of why they wouldn't do Godwhacker in Alabama, well, that is the Bible Belt, so they probably don't want to. They
Probably.
probably don't want to offend any.
Mm-hmm.
They maybe don't want to offend anybody. I don't know. Maybe I don't remember. But and then Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More with Walter Becker on lead vocals. Now, Time Out, going back to Time Out of Mind, and that was a later, that was something off the later
Gaucho.
album. Oh,
That's
right,
Gaucho.
right. That's Gaucho. Yeah, I can't even try to remember that one. But anyway, yeah. And then Walter Becker on vocals. Now, was it just me, or did when Walter Becker would get on the mic, he just would ramble?
He did that. He did that in New York too. Yeah,
But
because
my wife went to that show with me, and we both were like, "What?"
yeah, he talked a lot that night.
And I'm not really sure about what. Do you have any recollection?
I'm not really. I know he was excited because it was. He said where the show was is about 30 miles from Brooklyn.
Oh yeah,
So and they're a New York
they're New
duo.
York
So
dude guys. Yeah.
this gig meant a lot to them. And Walter, yeah, Donald didn't say much at all.
No, I
Yeah,
don't think Donald said anything. I think he just sang, but no, I don't
yeah. I
think he
think he's
said
trying
he
to
had.
he was trying to maintain his voice
Yeah,
because he's singing nearly all the tracks.
yeah.
You were saying Dirty Work, was that the song that the
The back,
background vocals handle?
yeah, that's what set list says here.
For
So,
us, it was Razor Boy from Countdown
oh,
to Ecstasy.
okay, yeah. So I'm kind of beginning to wonder because I don't. I mean, it's been 8 years, so I'm not 100%. I almost want to say Razor Boy was played here, not Dirty Work. But
Okay.
again, I'm going by what Setlist FM's saying, so I don't
Mhm.
know. I know that sometimes can be a little inaccurate, and I'm a little fuzzy with a lot of this. But anyway, after Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More, Bodhisattva, which again, there's certain guitar lines I was looking for, and I wasn't getting them, but it was still a pretty. I always loved Bodhisattva.
Me too.
To me, I just thought that was just a fun track. Um, then again, according to this, they do I Want to Do Everything for You, a Joe Tex cover.
We got that too.
Um, Josie,
Hmm.
great track. Peg, great track. My Old School, great track. And then they end with Reeling in the Years. So, um, again, I'm very, very glad I went to that show. Because Walter Becker would then pass away, what, later that year,
The following year,
following year.
the
So
cancer. Yes.
yeah, so I'm glad I got to say I saw Becker and Fagan. Granted, yeah, Becker was stoned out of his mind and would just yak for whatever reason, but it was still a great show. And it was just them. There was no opening act, no nothing. It was
Same with
just
us.
them. And the band was tight. Like I said, the only thing I had to quibble about was the guitar player just not capturing certain guitar solo lines that I felt like were integral to the song. But other than that, I certainly couldn't quibble. I thought Fagan sounded great. I had no complaints with him vocally that night. My wife enjoyed the show, and she's not really, she didn't know the music quite like I do. So, but yeah, it was a fun show. So I'm glad I got to win. I'm glad I got to go.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to see them as well. They were on my bucket list, so I had to see them. I felt that Fagan was straining a lot on his vocals. Musically, he was spot on,
Oh yeah.
but vocally, you can hear some cracks and things. I don't think his vocals but I think his vocals they're not as strong as they were in their 70s. Even if you I think if you listen to the two albums from the 2000s, Two Against Nature and Everything Must Go, I don't think his voice, and by that point he's in his 50s. I don't think his voice was quite as strong as it was as they were on those 70s albums. And a good friend of mine pointed out to me, he was like, "Yeah, Donald doesn't sound as good as he used to." And I listened back and I agreed. Still good vocalist, but not quite as good. I felt that way when I saw him live as well. But I mean, one of the reasons I thought that the background vocals handled Razor Boy was to give him a break, but I didn't realize it was something they were doing throughout the tour.
Yeah. So, so there you go. But yeah, all in all, good experience. Um, glad I got to experience it. So,
Me
so
too.
Walter Becker, rest in peace. You know, and but kudos to Fagan trying to still maybe carry the Steely Dan name. Every once in a while, I think he still goes out there and still plays. So, he hasn't come back around Birmingham, as far as I know. Which I don't know. What do you feel about that? If with him carrying the Steely Dan name still, with Becker being gone.
I'm not as intrigued about going to see them again, and I've had opportunities because they play a lot in the New York area, which is a couple hour, 3 hour drive for me. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not too far from the Beacon Theater and all that. I've never seen a show there, but it's I can go see them any year I want because they're still out there playing, close, relatively close by.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that I and you as well that we both saw Becker and Fagan. That's good enough for me.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't really have a desire to see them do the Royal Scam in its entirety without Walter.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just doesn't feel the same to me. I'm not like that with every band, but that band, I do feel that way.
Right. Right. And at least and if he does do it, then come on, bring Larry along, bring Denny along, bring Elliot along, bring anybody from that, put Bernard on there. Get as much of those guys on that album to play with it and bang out a fantastic show. But yeah, I'm kind of the same way. So and I was even hoping his book here, Eminent Hipsters. I was really hoping for some Steely Dan stories here, but yeah, he skips that entire period in the book.
I gotta ask you though, we were talking about this before we were on air. Does he
Mhm.
talk about solo albums on there?
No, nope,
Wow.
nope. He essentially jumps from uh he winds up skipping his college graduation ceremony. He'd already met Walter by this point.
Right.
And so, and basically from there, they jumped to the Dukes of September, which was, let's see, well, one of the things he does mention here is this is the beginning part of the with the Dukes of September, which was a tour
Mm-hmm.
he would do in 2012. In the beginning part of the chapter, in December 1980, I was living 3 blocks away from the Dakota, watching Monday Night Football
I know where you're going.
when Howard Cosell announced that John Lennon had been shot in the back. I walked over and watched as a huge crowd of sobbing New Yorkers gathered at 72nd Street and Central Park West. This pretty much set the tone of the decade to come. After delivering my album The Night Flight to Warner Brothers, I came apart like a cheap suit. The panic attacks I used to get as a kid returned, only now accompanied by morbid thoughts and paranoia, big time. I could hardly get through the day, much less write music, and I started seeing a shrink in gobbling antidepressants. So that's how he starts that chapter off. So fast forward then to 2012, he does this tour, the Dukes of September Rhythm Review, which is Michael McDonald, Boz Scaggs, and him performing a program of moldy old R&B and soul tunes that, like with some of our own hits thrown in to keep the TV babies happy. And that's just a direct quote from the book. And then he basically gives like a tour diary almost of the time. He goes, it follows all the way through to like about practically the end of the tour. And let's see. Oh, back to Alabama. The last, okay, July 28th, 2012. Back to Alabama, the last stop in the South, the Tuscaloosa Amphitheater couldn't have been more different from St. Augustine. In the 70s, Walter and I wrote a tune, Deacon Blues, that toyed with the cliche of the jazz musician as an anti-hero. It was kind of a takeoff of that old essay by Norman Mailer, The White Negro, not to mention our lives up to that point. I'm sure that we thought it was hilarious. The alienated white suburban kid thinks that if he learns how to play bebop, he'll throw off the chains of repression and live the authentic life, unleash the wild streets of art and passion, and so on. And then the chorus would sum up, and we all know the chorus. Um, let's see. Decades later, when we're back on the road, it had become a thing that when we played in Alabama, especially in the Tuscaloosa area where the University of Alabama is, we'd have to play the song. Chances are that none of the people drunkenly screaming for us to play Deacon Blues knew or cared what it was about. They just wanted to hear the words Crimson Tide in a popular song.
Right.
so so there you go. But anyway, yeah, it doesn't picture paint Alabama in a very nice way. But anyway, hey, thank you for keeping us on the map there, Donald. Anyway, so all right, folks, Royal Scam, Steely Dan. Let's talk about this one in the comments. Talk about Steely Dan in the comments. What do you guys think about this album? Um, Share with us some stories, what of your, like, share, subscribe. All those good lingo things. Let's see. One thing I do also have to promote for the both of us here. You know, Tim Derling's at it again with Let It Be Your Guide, the Kansas album review. This is one that both of us appear in. John, forgive me, I forget which ones you said you were in.
Left Overture,
Okay.
Point of No Return, Vinyl Confessions, and Somewhere to Everywhere, I believe it's called.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
hope I got it.
I'm just in Song for America and Mass because those are the two albums that I knew the most. But here again, those two albums I mentioned, those were played very heavily in the Clouser household too. So, but yeah, so go to Amazon, look up Tim Derling, do yourself a favor. If you're a Kansas fan, a weed head, whatever you want to call them, pick yourself up this book. It's just from what I've been able to look through, it is a very well done book, just like the Y&T book that John participated in with Tim earlier in the year. So there you go, folks. Steely Dan, Royal Scam. Talk about it with us. We love to hear your thoughts on it. So for John the Music Nut, unless you've got something we need to be promoting, which I
Yeah.
keep forgetting about.
Thank you, John. The only thing I was going to say is if any of you out there would like us to talk about more content like this, let us know in the comments.
Yes.
Because we are hard rock and heavy metal guys, but we're into a lot of other stuff as well. So if you want more content similar, let us know.
Yep. Yep. Hit us up. It's easy to do. And now that I've crossed that 500 mark, which thank you again for all of that. Um, yeah, let's expand the horizons a little bit. So as I said, for John the Music Nut, John Klaus, Johnny Metal, the Metal Dad, rock forever, folks. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.